Welcome to CINEPRO, where we bring your favorite movies back to life with quick recaps, hidden details, and everything you missed. The movie starts in a world devastated by a series of colossal earthquakes. The United States was split in half, forming a giant crater along the Mississippi River. The climate crisis has sent temperatures soaring to 46 degrees Celsius. People live in misery, hunger, and despair. Water has become rarer than oil, which costs $2,000 per barrel. In this scenario, the only chance of escape is by winning a deadly car race known as the blood race. Thanks to fuel prices, vehicles are modified and now powered by human blood ground up in their own engines. On the edge of an isolated road, a woman named Grace was fixing her car. Shortly after, she crosses paths with two men, and one of them tries to flirt with her. After politely refusing, she gets back behind the wheel and drives off. But, annoyed, the men decide to chase her at high speed. When they finally stop, the guy resumes bothering her, even ignoring his friend's request to stop. However, Grace acts quickly, grabs the gear lever, and violently strikes the man before throwing him into the car's engine as fuel. Since his blood wasn't enough, she rips off the other man's arms and accelerates, leaving them both behind. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, a group of homeless addicts tries to break into an automated water pump. The attempt doesn't last long, as authorities detect the attack and arrive with brutality to contain the intruders. During the chaos, one of the young men tries to run but bumps into two officers, Arthur and his partner Christopher. Christopher wants to arrest him, but Arthur, noticing the needle marks on the boy's arms, hesitates. Arthur suspects the boy is selling blood to someone and starts questioning him, but the boy doesn't reveal anything. Only after Arthur gives him a confiscated bottle of water does he share the location of a warehouse supposedly inhabited by insane people. Arthur's compassion in giving the water is what got the information. His approach, different from the violence of the other officers, proved far more effective. At the station, Christopher criticizes Arthur for not following force protocols, but Arthur reveals that in the past he also tried to steal food. A policeman forgave him on the condition that he change his life, which inspired him to become a cop. He then suggests investigating the warehouse that night. Reluctantly, Christopher agrees. That night, the two arrive at the warehouse and realize that a ceremony called the Festival of Chaos is underway, led by a man named Julian Slink. It turns out he's launching a blood race across the country with a prize of $10 million. All competitors have technological chips implanted in their skulls, which explode if they stray too far from their partners or finish last in any round of the competition. Among the competitors are figures like the Scholar, the Gentleman, Ribbon, and Grace herself. Witnessing all this, the officers decide to call for backup to dismantle the race. However, Arthur moves in alone and ends up being captured by the violent crowd. Slink, intrigued by the cop, decides he will also participate in the competition. He threatens him with death if he doesn't provide a good show and forces him to team up with Gracie against her will. Both have chips forcibly implanted and scream in pain during the procedure. Meanwhile, Christopher tries to help his partner but ends up being beaten unconscious by Slink's men. Arthur is forced into the car, and when he tries to escape, Slink activates the chips, causing intense pain for him and Gracie. With no alternative, he stays in the vehicle. At the official start of the race, Grace introduces herself, but Arthur says he needs to rescue his partner and arrest the criminals. She explains that they are dealing with extremely influential people and that an arrest would be impossible in that situation. Arthur tries to remove the implant, but Grace warns that it's impossible to rip it out. It can only be deactivated with adrenaline spikes. This frustrates him even more. Upon discovering that the engines run on human blood, he is horrified. He promises that while he's there, no innocent will be killed. Grace disagrees and reveals that she needs to win to pay for her sister Karma's treatment and bring her home. She also reveals there's a hidden camera in the car and that the organizers see and hear everything they do. Soon after, the two pass a point on the road where Ribbon appears amputating cheerleaders and using their limbs as fuel. This enrages Arthur, who forces Gracie to stop the car. He goes to confront Ribbon. The two get into a brutal fight until finally Ribbon gives up on the girls and flees, leaving the remains behind. Meanwhile, Gracie realizes the car broke down because of Arthur's actions and gets angry. Using binoculars, she spots another competitor's car approaching and quickly sets a trap on the road. The duo passing by are the Gentleman and the Scholar, who are also a couple. Seeing the trap, they stop immediately. Grace appears and threatens to cut off both their hands, demanding they fix her car. The Gentleman agrees and orders his partner to solve the problem, as he is an excellent excellent mechanic. After the vehicle is repaired, Grace and Arthur continue their journey but soon face a new problem. Their car is now in last place in the race. This means that Slink will be able to activate the implants and kill them. When all seems lost, Grace suggests generating adrenaline to neutralize the system. She approaches Arthur and suggests that they become intimate to trigger the necessary reaction. With no other way out, Arthur agrees. During the race, the two get involved and the strategy works. They both survive, escaping imminent execution. That night, during yet another party hosted by Slinky, Arthur is informed that the implant pulses have been recalibrated. The warning makes it clear that the adrenaline trick will not work again. Slinky hands him a business card, revealing that he is a member of the powerful Heart Enterprise. Arthur is shocked to learn this, since this corporation controls everything: housing, food, hospitals, and even the police. He approaches Grace and assures her that he will win the race. In return, he asks for her help to take down the organization behind it all, and Grace agrees. Next, the race leads them to a restaurant called Pixie Swallow Diner. There, a cheerful waitress takes orders with friendliness. But in the back of the place, a cook named Carl is seen dismembering human bodies to prepare the meals. Elsewhere, Arthur studies old newspapers, trying to understand the origin of Heart Enterprise. He discovers that the company caused the environmental disasters through resource extraction and industrial pollution. Grace interrupts him to warn that they are almost out of fuel, but Arthur refuses to harm innocents. Soon, the two receive information that the next stop is precisely the Pixie Swallow restaurant. When they arrive, they realize there is no one to guide them. In another part of the city, Slink arrives at Heart Enterprise headquarters for a meeting. However, he is forced to wait in the lobby, which irritates him, while the security guard meets a smiling man who is there for a job interview. The man reveals that the company will fire someone and called him as a replacement, which makes Slink worried about his own future. Back at the restaurant, Arthur and Grace eat hamburgers, unaware that they are made of human meat. Later, all the competitors stay at the motel next door, also run by Carl. During dinner, Arthur finds a human fingernail in his meal and panics. Trusting the food of a suspicious place in the middle of a deadly race made no sense. They should have inspected the kitchen before eating anything. He goes to the back and hears Carl talking to his daughter. They say they are out of meat, but the boss assures her that soon his men will bring more victims. Arthur runs to tell Grace, who vomits upon hearing the news. They decide to flee, but the car won't start. The situation gets worse when a group of cannibals arrives and begins to attack violently, spreading panic and screams. Arthur and Grace hide in the motel and run to the scholar's room, hoping he can fix the car. Since he's not there, they suspect Carl has kidnapped him and taken him to the kitchen. In another part of the city, the smiling man returns from the interview and meets Slink again. He excitedly announces that he got the job and that his mother will be happy, but Slink believes the man stole his spot. Driven by rage, Slink opens his briefcase and attacks the man, brutally killing him, crushing him mercilessly. At that moment, a staff member appears and calls him to the meeting. She informs him that the man he killed would have been hired for the maintenance department, meaning his death was in vain. At the restaurant, Arthur uses the phone to contact Christopher and tells him everything about the deadly race. He also reveals the existence of Karma, who is hospitalized in a nursing home, and asks him to investigate her situation. Christopher checks the files and discovers something alarming. Karma is hospitalized in a hospital controlled by Heart Enterprise itself. Meanwhile, Slink is finally taken to the meeting, but is annoyed to see that he will not meet the company president. The employee treats him with disdain and says that he is not worthy of the board's attention. She warns him that including a police officer in the race was a serious mistake. Initially, the superiors planned to kill Slink that day, but changed their minds when they saw him murder the happy man. The violence he demonstrated is exactly the kind of spectacle they want. The employee explains that the company wants to turn the race into a show broadcast to the public. Slink needs to raise the level of the spectacle, otherwise he will be dismissed. At the restaurant, Arthur, Grace, and the gentleman break into the kitchen and confront Carl and his staff. There, they find the scholar wrapped in plastic, ready to be cut up, and manage to free him. However, during the confusion, Carl grabs Grace and puts her in the back of his truck, fleeing afterward. The pain caused by the separation between Grace and Arthur activates both of their implants. With the car finally repaired by the scholar, Arthur sets off in pursuit of the truck to rescue Grace. What follows is an intense chase between the two vehicles, culminating when Arthur manages to block the road. He gets out and goes after Carl, beating him furiously. The cook begs for his life, saying there was no more money to buy beef and that chicken was also extinct. Desperate, he claims he used human meat just to survive. Arthur refuses to believe Carl's justifications and arrests him for his crimes. But Grace goes further and grabs a sharp object. She kills the cook and feeds him to her car's engine. Arthur does not stop her, as he understands that Carl was a cruel man. After that, Arthur tells Grace about his conversation with Christopher and reveals that Karma is hospitalized in a facility owned by Hart Enterprise. He believes this is no coincidence, but rather an intentional manipulation by the race organizers. The suspicion makes Grace apprehensive, so they decide that after the next challenge, they will visit the hospital where Karma is supposedly staying. The next day, a new race begins, heading to the state of Utah. During the journey, their car suffers a sudden explosion in one of the tires. Grace manages a temporary repair, but they soon realize they will need to take a shortcut called Steel City to get parts. The city, once a hub of the automotive industry, was abandoned after an earthquake caused by hydraulic fracturing. The reason for the abandonment was never clarified. Troops were sent to rescue survivors, but disappeared without a trace. Sometime later, Arthur and Grace arrive in Steel City and find the place completely deserted. Upon hearing a crawling noise coming from somewhere, they become alarmed. They try to leave as quickly as possible, but a group of bizarre people appears, forcing them to hide. The group's leader is astonished to see a new car and decides to take it to his supervisor. They steal the car and enter an underground shelter protected by a password. Arthur manages to memorize the password used by the intruders. Then, he and Grace use it and silently enter the shelter to retrieve the vehicle. Despite the danger, following the thieves into the shelter was the right decision. It was the only way to get the car back and stay in the race. Hidden, they watch as the group leader presents the car to his supervisor named Mercedes. The group reveals itself to be a strange cult that worships something called synergy, as well as car bodies and dashboard ornaments. Mercedes is the leader of the sect and sits on a throne made of scrap and broken electronics, commanding the cult with ritualistic movements. Arthur and Grace realize that everyone there is completely insane. Arthur decides to reveal himself to distract the group, allowing Grace to recover the car. The members try to attack him, but Mercedes orders them to split up and check for more intruders. After the group leaves, Mercedes starts interrogating Arthur, demanding to know why he is there. He says he just needs the car to continue the race, but she says no one can leave at night. She attacks him, but Grace appears with a gun and stops her. Soon after, threatening noises echo in the dark, sending Mercedes into a panic. It turns out that when they entered the shelter, Arthur and Grace left the door open, allowing creatures known as glimmers to enter. Mercedes reveals that the glimmers were once human, but the city's contaminated water turned them into monsters. Now, they are addicted to gasoline and explode when exposed to light. For this reason, the group only goes out during the day and never leaves Steel City at night, since they don't have enough fuel. At that moment, the glimmers invade the shelter and begin killing the cult members one by one in the dark. Mercedes suggests to Arthur that they collect the remaining stored gasoline to power the generator. Along the way, she asks how they got there, and Arthur ends up revealing that their car runs on human blood. Hearing this, Mercedes gets an idea to escape that place. She locks Arthur in the storage room and runs off in search of the vehicle. Elsewhere, Grace tries to refuel the car with glimmer blood and discovers that the liquid works as an overloaded fuel, making the car reach absurd speed. The discovery of glimmer blood as fuel was a game changer. Grace was smart to experiment and find an unexpected advantage in the enemy. Grace quickly drives to the depot and finds Arthur locked up. She frees him and they escape together. Meanwhile, Mercedes locates the car and tries to escape alone. However, the cult leader catches her and accuses her of betrayal. In retaliation, he shuts off the power, attracting the glimmers who quickly attack and destroy the survivors. Then, Arthur and Grace light fireworks to keep the monsters away as they run to the car. During the escape, Arthur is shocked to notice that the abandoned factory belongs to Hart Enterprises, confirming that the corporation was behind the city's downfall. Despite the revelation, they manage to reach the car, still surrounded by hungry glimmers. Grace turns on the headlights and destroys them with the intense light. She then collects their blood to use as fuel. Thus, they manage to escape the cursed city and cross the finish line just in time, seconds before being eliminated as the last ones. That night, at another mayhem party, Arthur and Grace plan to visit the hospital where Karma is supposedly admitted, but this would violate the rules, and Slink could activate the implants. Grace then seeks out the scholar and shows him the power of glimmer blood, capable of turning the car into an extreme speed machine. Impressed, the scholar agrees to help them on the condition that they share the special fuel. In exchange, he manipulates the remote control Slink uses to detonate the implants. The scholar warns that if the organizers find out, everyone will be in danger. Even so, he agrees to the plan. Next, Arthur and Grace continue their journey toward the asylum where they hope to find Karma. Slink quickly notices their movement and tries to activate the implants to punish them, but nothing happens. Shortly after, the duo arrives at the asylum, where they are greeted by a strange attendant, voraciously devouring a candy bar. When questioned about Karma and Dr. Clayfeld, the man simply says she was transferred. Meanwhile, Slink summons Ribbon and sends him to the asylum with the mission to eliminate Arthur. He gives the exact address and orders that Grace is not to be harmed, as he still has plans for her. Inside the asylum, Grace walks through the corridors and finds the place in complete chaos, with insane patients on the loose. This reminds her of the night she went clubbing with her sister before she got sick. At that time, Grace was looking for a man named Primo, who could help her enter the race. Karma was not comfortable with the plan, but supported her sister despite her fears, as they were both financially broke. Back in the present, Ribbon arrives at the asylum and asks the receptionist about Arthur, but the man, now almost naked, keeps devouring sweets. Ribbon offers more treats in exchange for information. Meanwhile, Arthur finds a nurse trapped inside a room. He frees her, and she explains that the patients revolted and killed most of the doctors and nurses. Before they can leave, Ribbon activates the hospital's red alert, intensifying the patient's violence. Arthur convinces the nurse to help him find Dr. Clayfeld. She explains that to survive, they will have to pretend to be insane as well. In another flashback, Karma is harassed by a man at the club, but Grace intervenes and drives the aggressor away. Karma asks to leave, but Grace refuses before finding Primo. Soon after, the man appears, and instead of taking care of her sister, Grace walks away to seduce him. While all this was happening, Slink was working as a DJ at the club, watching everything with curiosity. In the present, Arthur and the nurse walk through a blood-stained corridor pretending to be insane. She reveals that the asylum had not functioned as a hospital for a long time. The patients were being used as test subjects. Heart Enterprise had created a new candy called Smacks, advertised as a healthy sweet. But the product contained chemicals that caused madness, making the patients addicted to sugar, with uncontrollable urges to eat and kill. In another wing, Grace finally finds Dr. Clayfeld, gravely wounded. She begs for answers about her sister, but the doctor can only say that she needs to save them. Before he can explain further, a deranged patient bursts in and kills him. Overcome with frustration, Grace confronts the attacker. The fight is long and brutal, but she manages to defeat him. However, she accidentally causes a short circuit that starts a fire. Grace then reunites with Arthur, who is with the nurse. Desperate, she asks if there is any news about Karma, but the woman says she knows nothing. At that moment, Ribbon's voice echoes through the asylum's loudspeakers, offering a box of sweets to anyone who turns in the policeman. The offer inflames the patients, who start a violent hunt for Arthur. With Grace's help, he manages to defend himself from the attacks. A new flashback reveals Karma using substances alone while her sister danced with Primo. She was clearly fighting her own pain. Grace, even noticing her sister's state, was too wrapped up in her mission to notice. Back in the present, Grace sees a necklace on the nurse's neck. The necklace belonged to Karma. Furious, Grace attacks the woman, grabs her by the neck, and demands to know where she found it. The nurse, panicked, reveals that Karma left the necklace behind when she was transferred. However, she does not know who authorized the young woman's departure, but offers to take them to the file cabinet near the reception, where they might find a clue. The problem is that Ribbon is also at the reception, which requires caution. When they get there, the nurse betrays them and demands sweets in exchange for having led them there. She was also addicted to sugar, like the others. Arthur is attacked by the crazed receptionist, while Ribbon drugs Grace. Gradually, she loses consciousness and begins to remember the day she left her sister at the hospital. Karma was so dependent on the substances that she could no longer function normally. Crying, Grace admitted her and left the building. Outside, Slink was waiting for her. He had adapted her car to run on human blood and offered her a spot in the race. With no alternatives, Grace accepted, hoping to secure a future for herself and her sister. In the present, Arthur and Ribbon engage in a brutal fight, leaving both badly injured. Arthur does his best, even hitting Ribbon with a fire extinguisher, but his opponent still has the upper hand. Amidst the confrontation, Arthur finds a bucket full of sugar and has an idea. He dumps the entire contents over Ribbon, immediately attracting the crazed patients addicted to the substance. The group rushes toward the man and devours him violently, ending his life in a grotesque way. Shortly after, Grace regains consciousness and sees a photograph on the wall that shocks her. As the building begins to catch fire, Arthur quickly gets her out, and she takes the photo with her. The two manage to escape moments before the asylum explodes in flames. Sometime later, they return to Mayhem's party just as Slink reactivates the device and tries to torture them. However, he only threatens them and forces them to join the celebration with the other racers. Arthur apologizes apologizes to Grace for not having found Karma. Grace then shows him the photo she had picked up at the hospital, revealing that Slink was one of the doctors who worked there. The revelation leaves Arthur shaken, so they decide to confront him and force the answers out of him. Without wasting time, the two immobilize Slink and tie him to a chair. They try various methods to make him talk, but the man seems insensitive to pain, laughing like a lunatic. Grace insists on knowing what happened to her sister, but he refuses to answer. Outside, the party goes on with a crowd in ecstasy. Among those present are the twins Jack and Diane, who observe the racers. They came looking for Julie and Slink, motivated by the destruction of their hometown and the death of their parents, a tragedy in which Slink was involved. Now they only have each other left. The problem is, they have never seen Slink in person and don't know what he looks like. Inside the warehouse, Grace and Arthur are still trying to interrogate the prisoner, but realize the crowd will soon break in if he doesn't show up. So Arthur puts on Slink's hat and feather coat. He goes up on stage pretending to be the host of the party. He tells unfunny jokes, but the audience is disappointed by the lack of charisma and starts throwing things. Jack and Diane watch the commotion and assume that man must be Slink. They put their plan into action, starting a series of kisses throughout the place. The two carry a viral mutation called Dionysus, a deadly strain that turns the infected into violent creatures driven by desire. Each kiss spreads the virus, making the crowd frantic and sexually uncontrollable, which will prevent them from interfering in the plan to kill Slink. Arthur is attacked by a man on stage, but manages to defeat him quickly. The crowd goes wild with the violence, and Arthur realizes they crave blood and brutality. He then charges into the audience, attacking everyone around him, which finally pleases the crowd. Meanwhile, the twins continue to spread the virus, which now dominates almost everyone, leading the infected to copulate uncontrollably with anyone. A blue substance begins to ooze from their bodies. It turns out Jack and Diane are attracted to each other, but hesitate to give in to this impulse. As they watch the chaos, they remember their parents, who made love aggressively until they killed each other. Back on stage, Arthur is approached by a group of women who kiss him and transmit the virus. Meanwhile, inside the warehouse, Slink manages to free himself from the handcuffs without Grace noticing. He approaches her and reveals that someone very powerful from Hart Enterprises is interested in her story. He says he is the one who controls everything that happens. Then he pulls out a knife and prepares to attack, but stops when he smells something strange. Slink asks Grace to look out the window. She observes the outside and describes the scene, saying everyone is taken over by uncontrolled euphoria, their skin bluish, except for two apparently harmless figures. Slink panics and says the twins are extremely dangerous, begging Grace to help him defeat them. He reveals that Hart Enterprises had conducted experiments with the city years ago, involving a virus called the Dionysus strain. The V has TRS. The first causes an outbreak of euphoria, releasing all repression. The second turns bodily fluids into a blue L. The third leads to a complete mutation, turning the infected into violent zombies who kill each other. That's how the entire city was destroyed, and only the twins survived the experiment. Slink begs Grace to go to a nearby lab to find the antidote. Grace refuses at first, but Slink convinces her by saying that if he dies, she will never know where Karma is. Outside, the twins approach Arthur, believing he is Slink, and try to attack him. Luckily, Grace arrives in time and reveals that he is just a cop named Arthur. Convinced, the twins walk away to look for the real culprit. Then Arthur is affected by the effects of the virus and tries to seduce Grace, but she pushes him away and forces him to run to the lab to find the antidote. Arthur leaves immediately, while the twins invade the cabin where Slink is hiding. Diane kisses him, but nothing happens. It turns out Slink is also immune to the virus, just like the twins. They confront him and blame him for their parents' death, but Slink shows no remorse. He claims the city was too repressed and that he did them a favor by destroying it. Enraged, the siblings begin to torture him and show the large crushing machine they brought to end his life. Meanwhile, the infected crowd enters the final phase of the virus. In the lab, Arthur watches old videos of the experiments. He discovers that when two siblings have intimate contact, they produce an orange fluid, the antidote to the virus. Arthur immediately runs to Grace to share the information. She's shocked to hear this and realizes that the only solution would be for Jack and Diane to get romantically involved. Grace runs to the cabin where the twins are trying to crush Slink. Outside, the violent crowd tries to break in, while Arthur tries to hold them back with all his strength. Inside the cabin, Grace begins to manipulate the twins. She says she understands the pain caused by repressed desires and encourages them not to resist those feelings anymore. She claims she has already seen the way they look at each other and that they should allow themselves. Overcome by emotion, Jack and Diane give in to desire and become intensely involved. Grace's manipulation was the cruelest and most effective move. She used the twins' trauma and desire to force them to create the antidote. It was horrible, but it saved everyone. Slink takes advantage of the moment, collects the orange fluid generated, and activates the machine to crush the two of them. At that instant, the crowd storms into the cabin. Before they can attack, Grace sprays the antidote on everyone. The orange substance has an immediate effect and calms the infected. The situation finally stabilizes. The next morning, Grace confronts Slink and demands that he keep his promise. He agrees and reveals that Karma has been transferred to a place called Clairville Rehabilitation Center. He also says that he redirected the race route to go through there and that she can go, but if she arrives last, the rule will still be applied. The implant in her head will be activated. Grace tells Arthur everything, and the two decide to get ahead to save Karma. Arthur apologizes for having tried to get close to her the night before, but Grace says she understands, since he was under the effect of the virus. Shortly after, the race resumes. Slink announces the new challenge, to cross a region called Savage Lands. There, every time the brakes are used, the engine will be shut down for 10 minutes. This worries them, but Grace remains firm in her goal to find her sister. Later, as they enter the wild region, a group of biker barbarians suddenly appears and attacks the racers. The invaders manage to kill some participants and cause explosions and collisions. Grace and Arthur keep driving without stopping. At a certain moment, they see a vehicle stopped in the middle of the road. Arthur insists that she brake. Grace hesitates, but ends up stopping, which activates the 10-minute penalty. As they push the car forward, they realize the obstacle was just a wooden structure painted to look like a destroyed truck. With the engine off, the barbarians soon catch up to them. They get off their bikes and remove their helmets, revealing that they are all women. Arthur tries to talk, but one of them, named Carolina, hits him and knocks him out. The group takes the two to a place known as Majora, a female refuge in the middle of the desert. There, men are treated like animals and women like queens. Arthur is brutally beaten and locked in a cage. Meanwhile, Grace is taken for a spa treatment. Carolina says that it is a paradise for women and tries to convince Grace to stay. She refuses, saying she needs to find her sister. Elsewhere, Arthur meets another prisoner. The man is in a deplorable state. Arthur asks what those women want from them. The prisoner reveals that they are after the only thing they cannot obtain on their own. He reveals that the women use a milking machine to extract semen from men in order to inseminate themselves artificially. Arthur looks through the bars and sees an improvised laboratory where a woman connects a hose to a man's groin. Above them, a large jar slowly fills with semen through a tube, which horrifies him. In another part, Grace decides she can't stay there any longer and tries to leave. The women try to stop her. Grace says she must go to the Clairville Rehabilitation Center. Carolina, surprised, reveals that all those women were inmates at that place. They were tortured and raped, so they rebelled and set the hospital on fire. This shocks Grace, who asks if they know her sister, Karma. The name surprises Carolina, who reveals that Karma has been with them from the start. Meanwhile, Arthur is summoned to be milked, but tries to resist and escape. Unfortunately, the women quickly overpower him and begin a brutal beating session. Elsewhere, Slink is in the Hart Enterprises office, where he meets with two executives. They criticize the race for having weak and styleless characters. They want racers to wear sunglasses, smoke cigarettes, and for the death toll per episode to increase. They also demand that Slink use proper grammar in his reports, which irritates him so much that he throws a knife and kills one of them. At that moment, the true boss is revealed, the president of Hart Enterprises, who also considers the show decadent. The president informs him that next week the race will be broadcast publicly. But without Slink, upon hearing this, he rebels, and the boss reveals that they actually want to see him dead. The wounded executive on the floor gets up for a moment and says that Slink cannot die, and then collapses for good. Elsewhere, Carolina reveals to Grace that Karma was the leader of the rebellion and the bravest among them. She takes Grace to a room decorated with a shrine dedicated to her sister and gives her the hospital bracelet. Carolina says that Karma died during the revolt. The news shakes Grace deeply. Feeling guilty for having abandoned her sister, she breaks down in tears. The guilt and pain made her lose hope, showing how grief can be a powerful weapon. Carolina asks why they were separated since they were so close. Grace reveals that there was a man involved. Carolina comments that men are the cause of all the world's problems. The statement irritates Grace, who asks to be left alone, so Carolina leaves. After crying and mourning for her sister, Grace decides to leave that place and heads out of the camp. Outside, Carolina accuses Arthur of having destroyed Grace's life and tortures him. She's about to kill him when Grace appears, holding one of the women hostage. She demands that they leave Arthur alone. Carolina accuses Grace of being manipulated and attacks her. The two get into a brutal fight. Carolina nearly kills Grace, but at the last moment she notices the young woman's necklace with a photo of Karma and is overcome with guilt. She decides not to hurt another woman and walks away. Later, Grace and Arthur are back on the road. Arthur expresses his pain as he talks about what happened to her sister. He blames Hart Enterprises for everything and says they need to destroy that organization as a way to get justice for Karma and all the victims. However, Grace seems to have lost all motivation. She remains silent, staring at the horizon as they head off in an uncertain direction. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video. Goodbye.